Hello and welcome to CQ, the AWS Certification quiz show, where we're going to help you get certified. So today we're going to be looking at this Certified Solutions Architect Associate Level exam. And to do that, I'm going to need some help. So each week we're going to have a special guest who is specialized in the topic we're looking at. So today I've got with me Sander. Sander, tell us a bit more about you and what you do here at AWS.
Thanks, MJ. So hey everyone, my name's Sander and I'm a technical trainer here in the ANZ region. I have the privilege of sharing the AWS story with customers and imparting my AWS knowledge to them. I really love teaching in front of our customers. I love it when they have that light bulb moment, when they realize what they can do with our services versus the way they used to do things on-prem.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Nice. Thanks for coming, Sander. We're really happy to have you. So today we're going to be referencing this book. This is the official study guide available from wiley.com as well as amazon.com. Okay, are we ready?
I'm ready.
People along at home or at work, wherever you are, please feel free to follow us along and use the voting tool. Okay, let's start.
Okay.
Question 1. What are some reasons to enable cross-region replication on Amazon S3 bucket?
All right, so S3 is our simple storage service. And it's important to remember that when you create a bucket in S3, it's created in a specific region. So if I create the bucket in Sydney, it's going to give a lower latency to my users in Sydney. So let's keep that in mind while we review these answers. So the first one, you want a backup of your data in case of accidental deletion. So this is a use case for using cross-region replication, but there are better ways to do it. So you could use policies to determine who's actually allowed to delete the data. You could use versioning, so you could actually, if a user accidentally deleted something, they could restore the old version. And you can also use deletion with MFA, which is multi-factor authentication. So there's actually better ways of doing it. So let's mark this answer as a possible answer, and let's have a look at the next one.
And just bear in mind, Sander, that for this question, we're actually looking for 2 answers.
Okay. All right, so the second one, you have a set of users or customers who can access a second bucket with lower latency.
Okay.
So this feeds into what I was talking to before about S3 and having lower latency, having your bucket in the same region as your users. So this is a valid use case of having that cross-region replication. So if we have a bucket in Sydney and we want users in Singapore to access it, we can replicate that data to Singapore and our Singapore users will have that lower latency. So this is a very good answer. So we'll mark that as an answer as well.
Perfect. And number 4?
Number 3, so for compliance reasons, you need to store data in a location at least 300 miles away from your first region. So this is a very good use case.
Yeah.
So again, we might have our data in Sydney, and if we need to have it at least 300 miles away, maybe we select another region, North Virginia or Mumbai, something like that, to meet those compliance reasons. So that is, I think that is a very good answer as well. And lastly, your data needs at least 5 nines of durability. So if you've done your study, you'll know that S3 offers 11 nines of durability out of the box. So that's an incorrect
So that's
answer.
just wrong.
It's just wrong. We can eliminate that one straight away.
So I'm just going to quickly check the polls. At the minute, we are favouring A and B or B and C. So Sander, which 2 answers are you going to lock in for us today?
I'm going to lock in B and C.
Let's have a quick look. B and C locked in. Correct. Thank you so much, Sander. Let's move on to question 2. Yeah?
Yep, sounds good.
Perfect. Which Amazon EC2 feature ensures that your instances will not share a physical host with instances from any other AWS customer?
That's a really great question.
We get this a lot, right?
We do, and the customers typically want this when they have compliance reasons, when they want to be in a single tenanted environment. So let's have a look at these answers.
Okay.
So the first one, Amazon Virtual Private Cloud. So this is where you carve out that virtual private network in the AWS cloud.
Private sounds good to me, Sander.
And it is good. So this is network isolation. So basically when you carve out that private network, your instances are not able to talk to other customers' instances. But this is network isolation. It's not isolation at the physical level. So we can eliminate this particular answer.
And the reason being, questions led us into it, right? The lack of physicality.
Yes.
Perfect.
Correct. So the next answer is cluster placement groups. And there are actually three different types of cluster placement groups. Three different types of placement groups. The first is cluster placement.
Okay.
And this is where you have a logical grouping of instances in a single availability zone that communicate with each other over basically a low latency, high speed network. And in order to do that, we may actually put those instances on the same underlying physical host. So that is not actually a correct answer.
Okay.
However, there are two other placement groups that could actually meet that requirement, but obviously they're not listed here. But I'll go through them quickly just for everyone's information.
Great, that would be great.
So you've got partition placement groups. So this is, again, a logical grouping of instances. And what you can do there is you can put them into separate groups, and those instances will ensure that those instances will actually land on different underlying hosts.
Okay.
And then lastly, you have spread placement groups, where it's a group of instances, and we ensure that they are not on the same underlying host, but it's across availability zones, not just one AZ.
Fantastic.
So that's an incorrect answer, cluster placement groups. So we'll move on to the third one.
Perfect. Dedicated instances, what are we thinking?
So I'm liking this one. So dedicated instances, this is where you tell AWS that you want all your instances to be launched in a single tenant environment.
Okay.
So in the back end, AWS will actually ensure that customer instances will actually land on an underlying host that's essentially for their instances.
Perfect.
So that definitely meets the requirements. So I would like to mark that as a possible answer.
At the minute, viewers are agreeing, 100% going for dedicated at the minute, but let's still talk about full.
Yeah, so number 4, reserved instances. That's a billing construct. So you can save up to 75% over on-demand pricing.
Wow.
But you have to lock yourself in for 1 to 3 years. So really great.
Okay.
If you know what your workload's going to be like, you can lock yourself in and you get that saving.
But what I'm hearing, Sander, is this has nothing to do with this question.
Correct.
Okay.
So in this particular case, it's not reserved instances, it's going to be number 3, dedicated instances.
So locking in number 3. Everyone online has gone for 3 as well. Let's reveal the answer. Perfect. Nice simple one there, right? All right, moving on to question 3. Your web application runs on multiple Amazon EC2 instances behind an application load balancer. The load balancer is configured to perform health checks on the EC2 instances. If an instance fails to pass health checks, what statement will be true? And you've got 4 to choose from.
All right, so load balancers. When I explain this to my class or my students, I say that load balancer does 2 things, and this will help us answer the question. The first thing it does is it distributes load to backend instances.
Okay.
And the second thing it does is it does health checks on those backend instances, because we want to make sure that they're actually healthy when we send traffic to them.
So distribution, traffic, health checks, all really key here.
Yes. So let's keep that in mind when we look at these answers. So the first one, the instance is replaced automatically by the load balancer. Well, that doesn't meet any of the things that I've just said. So we know straight away that it's not, that's going to be a false statement. So we can scratch
number
that
1,
off the left.
false statement.
Yes. And the second answer, it's very similar. Obviously the difference is replaced. We've used terminated instead of replaced. But again, the load balancer doesn't terminate or it doesn't replace any instances. So that is also a false statement.
Okay.
Now I'm liking this next one. The load balancer stops sending traffic to the instance that failed its health check.
Sounds like a bit of distribution to me.
Yeah, and a bit of health checking going on as well. So, the load balancer checks the health of the backend instance. If it's failed, well, then it knows not to send traffic to there. So that meets the requirements of what a load balancer does.
But again, always look at all the answers. So number 4.
Definitely, and that's a little exam tip as well. So there may be some answers that, you may have 2 answers that are correct, but one may be more correct than the other depending on what the question's asking. But let's look at the 4th one.
Okay.
The instance is quarantined by the load balancer for root cause analysis. So again, the load balancer doesn't do any quarantining, so we can put that down as false.
So locking in
I would like to lock in. What did the
number 3?
people lock
Yeah,
in?
let me have a quick look. I mean, we're mostly going for 3, but there was one person who chose number 4 as well. So let's reveal the answer. 3.
Cool.
Good job. Glad our expert is indeed an expert. Question 4. Which of the following actions can be authorized by IAM? And I need 2 answers, please. So IAM.
Sure, so IAM is Identity Access Management. And the way I like to think of this, or IAM, is the 2 A's. That's how I always explain it in class. So authentication and authorization.
Okay.
So authentication, think of when you get to the console, you enter your username and password. Once you've authenticated,
Which we're all familiar with.
yes, IAM, you can determine what they can actually do inside IAM, what
So a
API
further step
calls
back.
they can make in
Yep.
the account. So let's look at the
2 answers we're
2
looking
answers. All right. So the first one, installing ASP.NET on a Windows server. So good old Windows. I'm a Windows person, so yay.
for.
So IAM can only control API calls made in the account.
Okay.
It cannot do anything inside an operating system. So therefore, with that logic, you can say A is incorrect.
Remove it
We can
from
remove
your thought
that.
process. Got it.
Yeah. The next one, launching an Amazon Linux EC2 instance. Well, that is an API call that you can make. And because it's an AWS API call, you can authorize that via IAM. So that
Okay.
looks like a correct answer to me. So
Could be good.
Yeah, we'll mark that one as a possible answer. Third one, querying an Oracle database. So this is very similar to that first answer that we had there. IAM cannot go inside an operating system and do anything, any authentication, authorization, and it
Okay.
cannot go into a database and do that either. So C is incorrect. And lastly, adding a message to Amazon Simple Queue Service, SQSQ.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's an API call.
Okay.
So therefore, we can authorize that via IAM. So I think that's a very good answer. So we'll lock in B and D.
So Sander looking for B and D. And we've got a bit of a situation on the poll, Sander. People looking at B and D as well as C and D. So do you want to just reiterate why you've chosen B and D before we reveal the answer?
So what you need to remember with IAM is you can authorize API calls.
Okay.
So when you're making a query to an Oracle database, you're not making an API call by Amazon. You're actually talking to the database directly. So we cannot authorize that.
Can we reveal the answer? B and D, indeed. Thanks, Sander. All right, question 5. What aspect of an Amazon VPC is stateful? Looking for a single answer.
Well, it looks like the answer's already on the screen, but we'll go through it anyway.
I mean, we're always going to have some technical difficulties, right? So pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Talk me through the 4 options.
Sure. So VPC, we talked about that before. It's that private network that you carve out in the AWS cloud. Now the key word here is stateful. So typically when we talk about stateful, we're talking about keeping track of session state or networking sessions.
Okay.
So the possible answers that we had up there, I'm going to go straight to the ones that draw my attention, which are the ones with VPC in the answer.
Sure.
Excuse me while I just grab my notes here. So the third answer, VPC pairing. So the reason I've jumped straight to here, because typically when I do an exam, if I'm being asked about something, in this case VPC, I'll jump to the answers that have VPC in them.
Okay, makes sense.
So VPC pairing, what is that?
Another exam tip I think we just picked up on.
Oh, I'm giving them out today for free. All right, so VPC pairing, if you have 2 VPCs, VPC pairing, you basically put a link between them so they can talk to each other. Now, for this particular answer, there's no sessions, there's no state. We're not keeping track of the state of any network connection. It's just a link between 2 VPCs, so that's incorrect.
Okay.
So next, VPC subnet. So when you create a VPC, you carve out a CIDR range that you create for your VPC.
Sure.
And then you subnet that further into what we call subnets. So which is basically a logical grouping of your resources in AWS, which are tied to an availability zone. Now here, again, we're not keeping track of any session state or any state, network state. So this is also incorrect. Then we've got network ACLs. So just a quick refresher, network ACLs are essentially rules around a subnet about what traffic can go in and what traffic can go out.
Okay.
And now you have to specify traffic on the way in and traffic on the way out. So that is not stateful, that is what we call stateless. So therefore that is an incorrect answer.
I love it.
Now obviously the answer is security groups. as we saw before. But let me explain a little bit further about security groups. So security groups are virtual firewalls that sit around an EC2 instance or elastic network interface. What's unique about a security group is you only need to punch a hole on the way in. So for example, if I'm browsing to a website in EC2 and I'm browsing on HTTP, I poke a hole HTTP on the way in, so TCP 80, and I don't need to poke that hole on the way out. It's stateful. The way I always like to explain it in class, and I have to shout out to Ben in Melbourne, one of my colleagues.
Another technical trainer.
Yeah, I totally stole this off him. So, in your younger days, I might have gone to clubs, and typically they'll check your ID on the way in. So
I wouldn't know.
Wow, they do. If you're young looking like me. So the bouncer is a security group in this case. He checks your ID on the way in.
Now I'm following.
Yep, and then when you go out, he doesn't check your ID. Now, a network ACL, he could be the bouncer at, say, a VIP room. So he'll check you on the way in, and he'll check you on the way out.
Got it.
That's a little example I like to use.
I love it.
Thanks.
So I take it we're locking in answer 2.
Yeah, that was really long-winded, but yeah, we're locking in.
Which is correct. So I'm just going to pause there for a second, Sander. Everyone, we are live, so please feel free to shoot us through some questions while, Sander and I are talking through these. Please feel free. Moving on to question 6.
What do we have there?
Ready. What are characteristics of the Amazon EC2 auto-scaling service? And I'm looking for 2 answers, please.
All right, so Amazon EC2 Autoscaling, this is that really great service that scales out, basically adds more instances as your load increases, and then scales back in when the load goes down, so you save on cost. And obviously you can set up certain triggers to determine when to scale out and when to scale back in. So the first one, sends traffic to healthy instances. Well, hopefully everyone's been paying attention. It's not autoscaling that does it. Do you know what it is? It's ELBs.
Those load balances.
Those load balances. So we can mark that one as incorrect. Now the next one, responds to changing conditions by stopping and starting EC2 instances.
Oh, bit of a long-winded answer, sure.
That is long-winded, and it looks correct from the beginning, but autoscaling does not stop and start. If we actually skip to the next one, it actually terminates and launches new instances.
Oh, okay, yep.
So B is incorrect, C is correct. And this is really important when you're using autoscaling, is to make sure you don't save any data on the EC2 instance, because autoscaling will simply take that instance out the back and get rid of it. So if you've stored data on there, you're going to lose it.
Okay.
So make sure you save your data in a database, S3, somewhere off the instance.
Remember, I'm looking for 2 answers, so let's talk about D.
Well, D is obviously going to be one of the answers. It's the only one remaining, but let's have a look. Enforces a minimum number of running EC2 instances. So that is correct. You can set a minimum number of EC2 instances in an autoscaling group. And then one of the questions that comes up in class quite a bit is, well, what do I set as a minimum number of instances? Now, if you're running, say, a production type application across 2 AZs, you want to have at least 2.
Okay.
That way, if one AZ ever fails, the other instance in the other AZ will be able to service that request. Now, there are use cases where you could have a minimum of 1 or 0.
Okay.
So I'll talk about that really quickly if we have time.
Yeah, please. Yeah. Please do.
So let's say batch processing, something that I'm sure some of our customers are familiar with, that typically happens after hours. Now, you could set your autoscaling minimum to 0. So you don't need to have an instance running 24/7, so you save on cost. When you have batch processing that needs to be done, you could use another one of our services like SQS. So you put messages inside the queue. When it gets to a certain level, then we trigger autoscaling to spin up more instances. Mm-hmm. Once all that batch processing is finished, then we shrink that autoscaling group back down, all the way back down to 0, and we save on cost. So that's a really great use case for 0.
So in this instance, we are locking in C and D?
Yes.
On the poll, looking like we agree. Fantastic. C and D it is.
Good work, guys.
Just quickly checking the chat. Seems like most people are interested in our t-shirts today. So these are for all of you people who are indeed certified. If you come along to any of our certification lounges at either reInvent, or any of our worldwide summits that have already started. Singapore is this week. Sydney is at the end of this month. If you are certified, come along to the Cert Lounge. We will lock you up and t-shirt will be yours. Okay, jumping back to the questions. Question 7. This one's on databases. Are you ready, Sander?
I'm ready.
When using Amazon RDS multi-AZ, how can you offload read requests from the primary?
All right, so
2 answers.
yeah, sure. So RDS, Relational Database Service.
Thank you.
No worries. So the key thing in the question here is multi-AZ. So that means we're running a primary in one AZ and we're running a secondary in the other AZ. Now we need to find out how we can offload those read requests from the primary. So let's have a look at the first one. So the first answer is configure the application to connect to the secondary node for reads and the primary node for writes. Now initially that looks like, yeah, maybe you could do that. But unfortunately, RDS doesn't work that way. So the primary database is the database that takes all the reads and all the writes. Here they're trying to say to change your client configuration to point to the secondary for reads and the primary for writes.
Okay.
That's not possible. So that is an incorrect answer based on the way RDS works.
Cancelling that answer.
Yep, so let's look at the next one. So RDS automatically sends writes to the primary and sends reads to the secondary.
Yep.
Well, that's also incorrect based on what I've just said. So RDS, the primary is always the one that will take the reads and writes.
Okay.
The only time we send reads and writes to the secondary is when there's a problem with the primary. We do a DNS flip over to the secondary and then all your requests go to the secondary.
So we get a lot of B and D at the minute on the polls, just so you know.
Okay, well, hopefully everyone understands why it's not B now. And I'll talk you through the last 2.
Awesome.
So add a read replica to a database instance and configure the client's application logic to use a read replica. So this is a correct answer. So RDS supports read replicas, and I'll give you a use case of how.
That'd be great.
Yeah. So let's say you've got an e-commerce site and your primary database is handling all of the customer transactions. What you can do is, let's say you've got a group of managers who need to run reports against that database to see what customers are buying and all that sort of thing. We don't want those managers to run those reports on the production database because it's going to slow it down. So we can create a read replica. We can point the manager's application to that read replica. That way they can run those reports on that read replica and not affect our production database.
Okay.
So that looks like a good answer to me. And the last one is Elasticache. Use Elasticache to cache frequently use data and update application logic to read and write from the cache. So this is another valid architecture where you can basically put a caching layer in front of your database. So it's Elasticache is one of our services. It's an in-memory cache, so memcached or Redis, depending on what you want to use. And you will need to update your application logic to update that cache. So whether it's lazy loading or write through, it's up to you how you want to do that. So I think C and D will lock those in.
Having a quick look, we got 80% going for C and D online. If we can reveal the answer, fantastic. Thank you, Sander. So going to a question for Sander. How long does it take for data to be replicated across RDS instances? That's from online chat.
Well, it's done, it depends on the database engine.
Okay.
But typically, the network link between 2 AZs is very high speed, low latency, so we actually stayed at sub 9 milliseconds. So it's going to be very quick, but it does depend on which database engine that you're using. So different database engines will treat that differently.
Perfect. Thanks, Sander. All right, can we bring up the next question, please? We're up to question 8 already. Can you believe that?
Yeah, I've only got 5 minutes left.
All right.
T-shirts.
Your company has its primary production site in North America and its DR site in Asia. You need to configure DNS so that your primary site becomes unavailable. You can fail DNS over to the secondary site. Which DNS routing policy would best achieve this? One answer only.
All right. So I love Amazon Route 53. It's one of my favorite services. Just a bit of FYI. Does anyone in the chat know why we decided to call it Route 53. I'll just leave that there and we'll come back to that question.
I like it.
All right, so Route 53, it's our DNS service. So
Sanders' favourite service.
it translates names to IPs. The other cool
Okay.
thing you can do is you can purchase domain names. So obviously something like Amazon.com will be taken, but you can purchase domain names through Route 53.
Okay.
Now, for those of you who are not familiar with DNS, think of your phone. So when you want to call, say I want to call MJ, I don't know MJ's number, but my phone, I'll just look up MJ. I will call MJ and my phone will translate that name into a number, which is...
I mean, I'm pretty offended you don't know my number.
Yeah, no, sorry, MJ. You distracted me.
Continue.
All right. So that's essentially what it does, translates names to IPs.
Awesome.
Okay. Now, you need to look at the question here. There are
Hold on, let me check if anyone has guessed correctly where the name came from.
Yeah.
Not yet? Okay, we'll
No,
leave it
no.
open on the chat.
B West, I think has answered it. It's a DNS port. So well done, B
Ah,
West.
yes, B West. Well done. All right.
DNS runs over UDP TCP 53, hence the name Route 53. Now, you need to look at the question, but very, very specific about what they want. So they want, when the primary fails, so North America, we want to flip over to Asia.
Okay.
So let's keep that in mind. So let's look at the first one, weighted routing. So this is where you have two records and you're basically, let's say you've got a record in Sydney and a record in Singapore and you've got resources in both regions. You can set up a weight for each one of those records. So you can say 60% of the traffic goes to Sydney and 40% goes to Singapore. Now in that particular scenario, you're actually doing active-active. So it's not a failover situation, so that's incorrect answer. So let's look at the second one, geolocation routing. So this is where you route based on the location that the request is coming from.
Sounds good already.
It does sound good, but again, you're going to be having an active-active type situation. So if I'm a user in America, I could have a geolocation record which will direct me to the North American site. But if I'm in Singapore, I have a geolocation record that directs me to Asia. So again, it's active-active, which is not what they're asking here. Then you've got simple routing, which is very basic. It's basically mapping a single name or IP to a specific endpoint. So there's nothing fancy going on there. So for example, if I type in Amazon.com, I will just go directly to a specific region. So that is incorrect as well.
Okay.
So that leaves us the last one. The answer is kind of in the name, so failover routing. So what we do here is you can have two records, one for North America, one for Asia. You can set up what's called a health check. So Route 53 can health check your website to see if it's up. If it goes down, then it basically serves the record for Asia and directs everyone over to Asia. So we'll lock in C. Sorry.
Not C,
No.
that was 4. Fantastic, thanks, Sander. All right, so that is all of our questions for today, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Just a quick reference, again, this is the official study guide for the exam we've been talking about today from our friends at wiley.com, also available at amazon.com. Okay, so Sander, we've been getting a lot of tips from you today, including that the answer is quite often in the question.
Yeah.
Can you give us a bit of a exam tip of the week that's not that one?
Yeah, sure. So my exam tip of the week is use the mark for review option in the exams. So if you're not familiar with
that?
Mark for review.
Mark for review. Got it.
So AWS exams give you the ability to mark a question and then you can go back and review it or answer it if you haven't answered it. When I think of exams that I've done in the past or recently, when you get 30 or 40 questions into the exam, your concentration levels can start waning and you start rereading. That's when you typically get a really long question.
How long is this particular exam we're talking about today?
I think it's 180 minutes.
Okay.
So 160, 180. I'm sure John can put it in the chat later. Thanks, John.
130 minutes.
130, not even close. So they've changed the exam, I just want to say that. When you get that lengthy question, you might end up rereading that question and basically not paying attention to what you're doing.
Your attention begins to wane.
Yeah, before you know it, you're thinking about...
Can't imagine what that's like.
whether you're having KFC or McDonald's for dinner. But that's a really bad place to be. You want to be efficient with your time in the exam. Typically, you only have a few minutes per question. So mark it for review, come back to it. So I typically, at the end of the exam, I have a little bit of time left over. I will take a 1 to 2 minute mental break, and then I'll attack those ones that I've marked and be a little bit more refreshed.
And you normally have plenty time using this method?
I do, yes, because it's all about being efficient with time in these exams.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sander.
Yeah, no
we'll be
worries.
back next week, live weekly, with our next CQ show. So thank you for joining us. Join us next time where we'll help you get certified.
Bye.